Ever wondered how top-class sales coaches help salespeople navigate, address, and overcome some of their biggest challenges?
Tune in for 15 minutes of coaching conundrums.
This is Coaching Conundrums, the video series which quizzes top-class sales coaches on how they would help sales professionals tackle a specific sales problem, all within the space of 15 minutes. Hi there, and welcome to episode 1 of Coaching Conundrums, the show where in 15 minutes, one of our expert coaches talks through their approach of tackling some of the biggest and most common sales challenges being faced today. My name is Richard Smith, Head of Growth at My Sales Coach, and for our first episode, I am delighted to be joined by Steve Myers. Steve, welcome to the show, first episode. Can you provide the audience with a quick introduction?
I'm delighted to be invited to be on this series, and number one, brilliant, love that. We'll take that. So my name is Steve Myers. I am one of the sales and sales leadership coaches at My Sales Coach. My background is very much a sales professional that moved into coaching. I've been selling just over 40 years. My career spans everything from encyclopedias to jet engines, and I've been coaching full-time since my daughter was born, and she celebrated her 16th birthday last week. So my business is 16 years old and a little bit. So that's me.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Steve. So, yeah, first episode, and we are going to be starting by looking at the conundrum of my prospects keep beating me up on price. Something we know is universally a huge challenge that many sellers are facing, and something that can be one of the most frustrating things for people to face, particularly when this often occurs at the end of the sales cycle, often after so much effort has been invested to get the prospect to the point of buying. So, Steve, for some context setting, how often do you deal with this conundrum when coaching sellers, and why do you think so many people struggle with it?
So I think it's definitely one of the most common problems that I encounter as a sales coach, and I think the reasons are many. I think one of the prime issues is that beating salespeople up on price is a trained move. People learn this in procurement school. And I think the reason that we often accept it as salespeople is because everybody struggles with a particular money concept. In other words, what is a lot of money to each of us as individuals? You know, if you ask a group of people, is £1 million a lot of money? Many of them will put their hands up. But if you ask them, is £100,000 a lot of money? You know, how many of them are still going to put their hands up? So when a prospect says, this is really expensive, if you have a poor money concept, you're more likely to feel internally, oh, actually, yes, this is a lot of money. And I think the third reason is because people don't understand the value of their solution. In other words, they only see the sticker price and they don't see the impact that solution has on their prospect's business and also on their prospect's life. Very often what we sell can be life-changing for people, and it's very hard to put a price on that. So if you are balancing product features and benefits against on a seesaw, on one side of the balance you've got product features, on the other side of the balance you've got price, then it's very easy in your view to accept that the balance is tipping in favor of price. If you're balancing solutions to problems, if you're balancing pain, for want of a better word, on one side of the scale, and then you've got price on the other, then it's much easier to visualize that balance tipping in favor of the pain.
Great. Some interesting points there, and already my mind's whirring into situations I myself have been in the past.
Let's cast our imaginations to a one-to-one coaching session. Let's imagine, Steve, that I've scheduled a coaching session with yourself, and I come to that session and I open up the conversation by sharing that I'm dealing with this conundrum, that in so many of my deals, my prospects are just beating me up on the price, on the proposal. So firstly, what questions will you ask me to explain my view of the problem, and why specifically those questions?
So I think, like all sales problems, as coaches, as sales leaders, we need to understand whether we've got a technical problem or a conceptual problem. Excuse me. So a technical problem is, look, I just don't know what to do or say in this particular situation. Or the conceptual problem is, actually, I have a mindset issue, like we just discussed. Actually, I'm in some level agreeing with my prospect that this is an awful lot of money that I'm asking them to spend. So I think the way that we address that, if we talk about the technical problem first, is we need to understand where in the sequence this is coming. So where in the process are we discussing price? A lot of times, again, I think like all sales, any problem that we encounter in sales, I always liken it to a race car coming off a corner. The problem, the error doesn't occur on the corner. It occurs several hundred meters up the track, with the car being on the wrong line, on the wrong speed, in the wrong config, et cetera, et cetera. So the problem that we encounter, if we get a problem with sales, often with price, it often occurs further up the sequence. So for instance, have you done pain discovery? Do you know not only on the surface what the prospect is trying to solve, what are the service level problems, but have you asked about the impact of those problems on the wider business? And then what that allows you to do is then to understand that actually this small issue that we might be trying to address actually has a much bigger impact. It's been going on for multiple years, and actually there are many, many multiples of your price that are either left on the table or you've lost. So we can then balance that figure against the price rather than just a surface level problem. So the time to talk about price is after pain discovery. But one of the problems that I always see is people do it after demo, right? So we're sending quotes and proposals to prospects, and the number is a surprise to them. So one of the things that I always say is no prospect should ever receive a proposal that's a surprise, where the number is a surprise. So after you've done pain discovery, what you can then do is say, does my price justify? Is my price justified by this solution? So I think sequencing is an issue. And then from a mindset issue, one of the things that I insist that all my coachees do is understand the value that they bring to the table, and to have a sense of conviction based on certainty, not faith, and we'll talk about that in a moment, but have a sense of conviction that the value that they bring to the table massively outweighs any price that they may be asking their prospects to pay. And the way that I get them to have that sense of conviction is to go interview their client base, and go ask them what were the problems and challenges that existed before we engaged. What was the impact of those problems and challenges on the wider business before we engaged? And then what's life like now? And I find that if you do that with 3 to 5 clients, you walk away from that exercise with, a couple of centimeters of air between your soles of your shoes and the ground, because you have a sense of conviction based on certainty. You've not taken it from a case study. You've not heard it from your manager. It's not come from a website. It's come from the source of the truth, right? It's a sense of conviction based on certainty that your solution, your organization brings real value. And that's often, in my experience, deals with the mindset issues around price.
I love that. I love that. Just once you get that belief in what you're selling, actually helps you kind of stand your ground, but also actually makes prospects more reluctant to try and beat you up on prices. Something I kind of took away from that. And I was just curious, Steve, you've obviously given me one solution there of how I can fix that issue of interviewing my customers to get a sense of the value they're experiencing. What else could you do for me as my coach to help me understand how I can go about fixing this problem and prevent so many prospects beating me up on price?
Well, I think it comes down to the two things that we've spoken about. One is fix your mind, right? Be in the right mindset. And then the second thing is insist that you talk about price at the appropriate time in the process. So what do you do, for instance, when a prospect rings you up and says, hey, Rich, I've been on your website. How much is it? Right? In other words, we get the price question too early on. What's the temptation there, of course, is just to deliver the price, right? Without pushing back. So what does it take to equip people to push back? And again, you have to think about mindset and you have to think about technique. So, the technique is, I always tell people to give people a price bracket. So if I think the solution is going to be 50 grand, I'd always tell them it's going to come in between 48 and 60,000 pounds. And then I say, are we still talking? Because a lot of times when prospects ring up, they don't know whether or not they're having a 5,000 pound conversation or a 50,000 pound conversation. So again, I think it's important for us, to address that. But if price is too early in the conversation, then you can only balance features against it. You can't balance pain against it. So deal with that, but then say, would it make some sense if we talked about your use case, what it is that you're looking to achieve, why you're looking to achieve it, and then I can refine my price. And then if it comes in too late, which is often, again, one of the things that they teach buyers in buying school is a move that I call that they call the flinch. So whatever price you put in front of me, you're going to get some version of. And I think very often it helps to understand that actually this is a trained move. This is not real. This is what people are trained to do. So and there are various, no, we won't go into it, but the various flavors of flinch, everything from a gentle through to, I'm going to throw your proposal back at you physically and tell you to leave the room. So help understanding that this is nothing more than a trained move, again, helps people understand that I can plant my feet. If I've built a sufficient pain case, if I've done a proper budget discovery, I know that if I'm getting hammered on price at the back end, especially if it's by a professional procurement guy, this is just a negotiation stance. And then it's up to me to either plant my feet and say, my price is my price, or to move into some form of negotiation.
Perfect. And finally, Steve, we all know that coaching is ultimately a waste of time if A, the person you're coaching is uncoachable, in other words, they are resistant to coaching, or B, they have a desire to change, but ultimately really struggle to commit to that change. So I'm just curious, what's your approach for getting me to commit to making a change and implementing what you've coached me on as far as this specific conundrum is concerned?
That's a great question. I think people change depending on what their motivation is to change. So one of the things that I will do is my own pain discovery. So when people say to me, I'm struggling because I'm getting beaten up on price, then I will do my own pain discovery. I will say, tell me more about that. I will say, be more specific, give me some examples. I will say, how long has this been going on for? I will say, how much do you think this has cost you? How much money do you think? And it's wonderful. It's a great thing as coach, because that's exactly the pain funnel that we take, coach, what we teach in our program. So we should practice what we preach. But if I can help somebody understand that actually their price sensitivity has cost them $100,000 in commission over the last 3 years, then that's a pretty powerful motivation to change, right? So I'm a firm believer that you can't motivate anybody to do anything. You have to help people discover what their motivation is. So nobody reports to me. I can't make them do anything, but what I can do is help them find a reason to step outside their comfort zone and do something different to what they're doing right now.
Love that. Steve, so much gold in that, just focused on one specific conundrum there. I'm just going to go through some of my biggest takeaways of what you've said. Why do people face this conundrum? They just don't understand the actual value of their own solution. They don't actually get to see what happens when they sell it. What's the impact? And you kind of relate it. My other takeaway is like so many things in sales and this price issue is that it's like a car coming off a corner. Actually, the problem is not at the point of delivering the price. It actually occurs several stages back in the track. Yeah, and the other thing I loved is this concept of actually going out and interviewing your client base, not relying on testimonials. Speak with your customers, set up time, hear their passion, their own words as to the value that they're getting, and use that belief, that inspiration that you're getting to influence how you sell and communicate. And then finally, how do you actually get people to actually commit to making this change? It really comes from using great selling skills. Asking them, how often are they facing that issue? How much do they think that issue has cost them? Because most salespeople are in the profession because they're motivated by money. Get them to understand the actual the impact that's caused them, because that can be the thing that helps them make the change. You can't motivate. You have to get people to discover what their own motivation is. Steve, so much goodness in that. Thank you for taking us through your approach, and thank you to listeners for tuning into this first episode. Tune in next time for our next coaching conundrum, which is I'm an SDR and I'm trying to get promoted to become an AE. But for now, it's goodbye from me and it's goodbye from Steve.
If you want to learn more about how my sales coach can help your sales team unlock their potential and overcome the many conundrums hindering their success, go to www.mysalescoach.com.